Okay.
Okay, it's a little short.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Aula. We have this panel today for you, and I promise you that it will be adding value for you in terms of cybersecurity readiness at company and organizational level. And I have 4 distinguished experts today on this panel, and we're going to handle this in the appropriate alphabetical order. Before we do that, so as you see, we have, my name is Marc Vael from ISACA, Belgium. I will be the moderator today, and I'll make sure that we keep the time so that we are in time for the keynote of Bruce Schneier. The 4 people who will present to you are from different organizations. Maurice Cashman from Intel, Wim Bartsoen from BNP Paribas Fortis, Roberto Tavano from Unisys, and Gerrit from Vanbreda, insurance, risk and benefits. Before we start, I actually would like to show you 7 elements or 7 components, which we call 7 enablers, to validate how cybersecurity readiness can be actually be perceived from a completeness point of view. And of course, you see that the central point in this overview is the policy framework and vision statement, which is key as a starting line. And we've seen already a lot of topics today on the vision and the strategy, and indeed that's a starting point. But then there are 6 other components which drive the cybersecurity readiness. Information, organization, processes, and infrastructure. Those are 4 easy ones. But the 2 which are most challenging and which I hope that the panelists today will tackle deeper is also linked to culture, ethics and behavior, and also to skills and competences. And in that perspective, of course, we've seen a lot about the fact that people do care and are a very important asset in cybersecurity. It's about the people, but there's more than that. We really also want to focus on the technology item, the technology controls which are there, also in terms of the process controls, which are important, but of course, social controls and then the organizational controls are also important elements. So keep those also in mind in terms of what are the focus areas where people want to really pay attention to in order to make sure that cybersecurity is well handled in a complete fashion and not just in a single-sided fashion. I, of course, want to refer to you to a series of white papers that ISACA has published in terms of cybersecurity. And if you go to www.isaca.org/cyber, you come to the website where you can find all these things free to download and to help you as well. But enough said, I think the core of today is a panel on which these 4 experts will challenge you, but also will share with you their experiences, their concrete examples on how to tackle cybersecurity readiness at the company and organization level. So the focus is on the inside of the organization. What should people and organizations focus on? And in order to do it alphabetically, I've chosen Wim Bartsoen from BNP Paribas Fortis to kick off with his vision on that subject. Wim, here you go.
Thank you, Marc. Now, in the preparation for this panel, Marc asked us to give each our own view on what we consider to be cybersecurity readiness. So here comes the view of the bank. It's one of the views, possibly. So in the range of questions that we can tackle in this panel, there are 2 in this short introduction that I will give that I would like to address. The first one is, what do we consider to be cybersecurity readiness and how do we do it in the bank? Now, from our point of view, cybersecurity readiness is part of the bigger picture. It's part of an information risk management practice, and cybersecurity is a lens through which you look at changing aspects of the environment and of the response to this environment that you have to muster. So it typically focuses on a subset. It is not comprehensive for everything that the risk management function in the organization needs to do. Now, in an information risk management function, you typically need to have a proper understanding of what the business is and how it is evolving, and how the environment in which it is operating is evolving. In the previous session, I attended the presentation on the Tor network, and an entire brave new world opened up to us. That is, let's say, an announcement of how our environment is evolving. This is something that we should keep an eye on, but we should also look, and this was also very nicely addressed in the presentation before, so in the workshop on Tor, that this evolution is a double-edged knife. It brings benefits and risks. Yeah? At a micro level or a microeconomic level, you have as a security practitioner to keep the two notions in mind as well. At an organizational level, evolution of the business, evolution of the environment presents opportunities, where as a security practitioner, if you want to stop being invited to the party, you hit the brakes systematically, so be careful there. And of course, this is our bread and butter, it also presents risks. Now, what has changed in our business in the past few years, and coming back from the brave new world picture that we saw in the previous discussions, we go back to the bricks and mortar world here. About 4 years ago, a branch of the bank looked a bit like this. Yeah. And in the space of 4 years, just 4 years, a lot has changed. Yeah. Many face-to-face contacts are replaced by phone banking or web banking type of contacts. Cash deposits and withdrawals are operated by interacting with a machine, so ATMs typically. Banking has also increasingly gone mobile. You can bank today, anytime, anywhere. Yeah? There's a great convenience in that notion, but it also opens up a lot of threats. Since 2007, approximately 50 to 80% of our transaction volume has moved online. Today, still to a large extent through classic electronic banking over the internet, but also 10% of our customers today are active users of mobile banking applications. So they effectuate transfers or they can consult their balance while on the go. Now, this is not just a natural evolution, this is also really an objective of the bank. The bank wants to resolutely proceed going digital. Yeah? Because we operate in an environment where competitive pressures push us to do so, and also because it makes business sense for the bank, among others, from a cost point of view. Because we can offer this greater convenience and flexibility at affordable cost in a virtual world. In the real world, this is a lot more difficult. Now, the bottom line here is that the banks are moving more and more of their retail services in the virtual world, where they are effectively exposed to the vagaries of cyberspace. Now, as a security practitioner, you build your cybersecurity strategy around enabling this. Managing the risks, but at the same time enabling this. A couple of minutes ago, I said that the cyber security notion is a lens through which you look at the wider range of information security or information risk objectives. And so it's a lens that typically focuses on a subset. Here is what this looks like in BNP Paribas Fortis. In this picture, you can see that we articulate our information security strategy around 4 objectives. One of them being countering cybersecurity risks. But at the same time, we also want to facilitate the open enterprise. Now, we are increasingly working with partners with their own domain of management control. We are opening the bank to suppliers that in a more intimate way interact in our processes. And of course, they're also our clients. There's a more classical notion of securing our information assets, and then in the information security practice, we also simply want to get better at what we do. This is a set of objectives that are defined and refined in the context of threats to which we are exposed. You can see the top ones as we have labeled them in our organization on the top right of the slide. Now, each of these information security strategy objectives drives a set of strategic information security capabilities. So we start from the objective and then drive capabilities. Yeah. Each of these capabilities has a vision statement that takes into account the context of the threats. Yeah. A vision statement that has a 5-year timeline. So we look forward. Yeah. And where we work our way towards that, the realization of that vision through the notion of a maturity matrix. So we specify what that security capability means. It goes beyond just a one-liner to say what it is and what the ill-defined notion of maturity of that capability is, and breaks it down across a number of dimensions. And for each of those dimensions, we define where we are today, where we want to be next year, where we want to be in a couple of years' time. That maturity matrix translates into a roadmap through which we do the strategy execution. So strategy roadmap will translate itself into components of a security program through which the implementation is driven. Now, this is the view of our circle of control in the bank. These are things that are fully under our own control. But there's also a circle of influence for the bank. And we think that we can effectuate change for the better beyond our own circle of control by joining forces with a number of other parties in the field in order to effectuate change for the common good. And this is also one of the reasons why we participate to the Cybersecurity Coalition. That, in a nutshell, is what we think is cybersecurity and how we go about it.
Perfect. Thank you, Wim. Next in panelist is Maurice Cashman. Maurice, the floor is yours. And
I don't have any slides, thank you. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to speak a little bit today about just a few key characteristics or a few key elements of what I think organizational readiness means. And I'm hoping that my unique background in both tactical security and strategic experience is valuable to you in moving your own organizations forward. You look at today, organizations are transforming. They want to adapt new disruptive technologies. They want to move fast into new business areas. And to do that, they have to establish trust. And that's where security is such a key enabler to the business today. And in my role with Intel, we're trying to help our customers make that transformational journey. You know, I started security as a soldier, right? So in conflict, in physical conflict, we brought cybersecurity to the battlefield. And that from the very beginning, back in the late 90s. And my first experience with advanced threats, so to speak, was APTs from nation states back in 1996. This has been going on for a long period of time. So when I go into an organization today and we talk about their readiness, I look at 3 key characteristics: culture, characteristics, and capability. And I'll start with culture. You look at the executive awareness. In talking with a lot of key customers, I'm kind of surprised still that there is an executive challenge. With all the media attention, with all the lost money, with all the regulatory regulations that are out there, there's still quite a bit of executive non-commitment to investment in cyber, so to speak. And that's a challenge. So we try to break down that barrier. User awareness and user attitude. We look at how is the user participating in security decisions. For example, a lot of people will say that the user is stupid, right? And I think to me, I think that's the absolute wrong approach in your organization. The user is an absolutely essential component to your security architecture. It's one of the best sensors. It's one of the best decision makers. You have to involve them in a positive way in your architecture. Phishing, still one of the top vectors. One of the best ways to stop that is by having a user identify that and report it. When I ran the U.S. military cert in Europe for about 5 years, and we had a lot of sophisticated technology, and we tracked the different ways that technology contributed to the output, and by far, user reports of problems was the best indicator that we ever had. So that's very, very important. The other part of culture is what I call shared purpose. And growing up in the military, you really get ingrained with the bonding of security and how that's such a mission enabler, and that shared purpose of having trust with your counterparts. And I look at leadership in organizations today, are they establishing security as a shared purpose with the business? It's not all there in every enterprise, not even the ones across financial sector or government sector, which you consider to be high threat. So those three key characteristics of culture are very important. Look at the characteristics of security architecture. And I've characterized the characteristics of resilience to be three things: speed, agility, and collaboration. And you look at the attackers, they're operating with those characteristics. You look at the business, they're operating with those characteristics. How is security doing? Right? How do we look at speed? How are we using force multipliers like automation, intelligence, integrating those things with the technology to ensure that at the point of attack, that piece of technology can make the right decision at the right time? Right? Those are some important aspect of your architecture. How fast are you operating, both at the technology level and at the process level? A lot of organizations today do not measure a very key process, which is incident response. And you can break that down into four to five easy measurable sections and find out where do you have key problems, what's a barrier to speed. In my organization, we had 25 guys doing 24/7 incident detection. We thought we were pretty good. We went through a Lean Six Sigma project to measure our mean time to identify a problem. It turned out to be like 45 days. 45 days to close an incident, and we had trained people. Right? You have to break down those processes. So speed is very important. The other aspect, agility. How fast can you move in one left or right? Can you integrate a new piece of technology easily? Can you move into a new business area quickly? Or as a security person, can you support the move to a new business area quickly? One time I was faced with a question about whether we should allow social media to be accessed by all the soldiers on our network. 9 people out of 10 said no. I said yes. Right? Because we have to be able to say yes to the business. We have to be able to say we can do that. We have to put the right controls in place. We have to think about it from all aspects, culture, controls, and so forth. We can allow those things to happen. Be a very positive enabler for your business. Be very agile in your approach. The third characteristic, collaboration. And that's collaboration mostly internally. What I find in a lot of organizations is that there's still quite a few barriers. Was with a customer a few months back, quite a good advanced customer, and they were struggling with incident response. And the main reason they were struggling with incident response was not because they didn't have smart people. In fact, they had great guys, great reverse engineers, well known in the industry. What they struggled with was collecting data from all the different business elements, we'll say, and getting that centrally done so they could respond and validate attacks faster. Right? That's a key problem. I see that all over government, finance, energy sector. There's a lot of different silos, right? And that's collaboration internally. That's very important. I think it's also very important for your technology to collaborate with each other. It's kind of a new area where the technology has also operated in silos in the past. And I think if you look at the landscape today, what's available in the market, there is a lot of more integration, left, east, and west, as we say. Right? It's between different types of technologies. So that's very important. I look at the third area, which is your capability. And this, I think, where it comes down into very, very practical terms. Putting the right preventative capabilities, the right detective capabilities, and the right intelligence in place. And one of the first things we talk about with customers is look at the different threat vectors that are successful. Phishing, SQL injection. They've been successful for 10 years or more. Right? Well, phishing has been successful attack vector for a long time. How are you addressing that? How are you looking at those stages? And what we find is that customers, they don't use the users and they don't use users in that process. But more importantly, they've looked at, say, endpoint technology or they looked at their network technology and their endpoints and say they haven't maximized the capability there to protect against those key attack vectors. Right? And I think if you go back in your organization, look at how well you can defend your key business applications against SQL injection from both assessing vulnerabilities at the application layer, but also at the hosting and the network layer. How well are you protected against some key attack vectors, because they've been successful for a long time. The other key aspect today, and this is growing up in the CERT community at monitoring incident response, has been one of my passions, and working with a lot of European clients over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen certainly a growth in the interest and the need to develop that capability in your organization. So fast threat detection and response is absolutely key. And people today are investing in different types of technology to do that, but there's a lot of different layers to look at. If you want to get really sharp, really good at fast threat detection and response, look at these key layers. Sensoring, analytics, intelligence, those are the key building blocks to making that effective. It's not one technology or the other, right? It's not a SIM or this SIM. It's different layers that come together. In fact, it starts with the fundamentals, right? People and the incident response process are the key things. But look at those layers. Sensoring, analytics, and intelligence are what driving your capability to do fast threat detection and response. How well do those things come together in your CERT, in your SOC, whatever entity is doing that process in your organization? Look at those different layers. And then finally, look at the last level of capability. There's been a lot of talk about intelligence in terms of technical intelligence, but as an organization, think about developing an intelligence strategy. How do you collect it? How do you generate it? And how do you exchange it securely? And then how do you manage it, store it, and process it? A lot of people are only looking at certain aspects of it. They're looking at collecting it, looking at the various sources out there, different portals, different organizations who are providing it. Not everybody's looking at how that intelligence gets integrated into both preventative and detective controls, and that's quite important. And then finally, the exchange. There's been a lot of talk about exchanging intelligence, exchanging information, both laterally as well as with your industry counterparts, and that's probably the last level of capability to consider. So those are, from my experience, those are some of the key elements of organizational readiness. So turn it over to the panel.
Thank you very much, Maurice. And as you noticed, ladies and gentlemen, I've given strict instructions to each panelist to take 10 minutes maximum, so that there's enough time for you to ask your questions. So be prepared before the final one airs. The next one is Gerrit. Gerrit, the floor is yours.
My name is Gerrit Metz. I work for Vanbreda. We are a leading insurance broker in Belgium. And today I will tell you a bit more about cyber insurance. Now, studies show that a general audience like this remembers about 10% of a presentation. So, and after a long day like this, it will be probably less. So I will ask you to remember only one thing, and is that cyber risks nowadays are perfectly insurable. And there are quite a few good insurance policies on the market. And there is even some good news. They are quite cheap compared to other insurance policies. So if you already remember that, I'm already a happy man. So when we walk through the buildings of our clients, it's not hard to find ICT dependence. In fact, it's everywhere. So that means that also the cyber risk is everywhere. But people tend to think that ICT infrastructure will always be there and will always be up and running. Of course, that is not the case. And if it's not up and running, it can have a major financial impact on your company. But then people mostly think, well, we have insurance, so it will be covered. And also that is not the case, because in traditional insurance policies, cyber risks are mostly excluded. So you really need a specialized type of policy, a cyber insurance policy. So let's take a look at such a policy and see what elements it's made of. A good cyber insurance policy consists of two big parts, and that's the part that protects your own damage, that finances your own damage, and that the second part is the damage to third parties. You can compare it to your car insurance. It works exactly the same. You have your own damage, and you have your liability, the damage to third parties. When we look at the first part of own damage, that's really the major insurance guarantee, because we're looking at network interruption. Your company has been hacked, your system is down and you have a major financial impact. That's what's covered in that insurance guarantee. Also, if you lose data, and the recovery of those data will be financed by that insurance guarantee. Secondly, if you are a victim of cybercrime, you really want the assistance of specialized cyber consultants. Also, those costs will be paid by the insurance policy. So bring in the supermen and women, let them help you, and the insurance company will pay for it. The next guarantee is cyber theft. That can be theft of money, can be theft of goods. Quite notorious example was a hacking of a shoe store, an online shoe store, where the hackers paid for one pair of shoes and had a delivery of 100 pairs. There's a rumor that this hacker was female, but of course that is only a rumor. The last guarantee of the own damage part is the extortion. In Belgium, we had already quite a few hackings from Rexmundi. If you're a victim of such a cybercrime and you have to pay ransom money, this will also be financed by this insurance policy. So those are the elements of the own damage, your own financial impact. But when you're a victim of cybercrime, you can also cause financial losses to third parties. That's your liability, which is also covered in this insurance policy. First of all, in the case data are stolen, you can be liable. A very famous example is Target, where a massive amount of data were stolen. Of course, there were financial data, bank card data, etc. They got a lot of claims. Those claims will be handled by your insurance company. But also your network can be used by hackers to cause damage to third parties. It can be financial damage, but it can also be physical damage. There was an example in Australia. This Australian triathlete was hit by a drone that was taking pictures of a run she was participating in. And after investigation, it appeared that the network that was used to steer the drone was hacked. So also physical damage, material damage, cost to third parties will be covered in this insurance policy. As you can see, it can be useful. Finally, of course, there is the whole legislation about the protection of privacy. There is a new legislation, European legislation coming, although nobody knows for sure when it will be there. But those type of fines, when authorities give you a fine because private data were stolen from your network, will be covered by the insurance policy. Even so, for the notification costs, if you have to notify the people from which the data were stolen, those costs will be covered. So as you can see, a cyber insurance policy gives you a very broad cover, helps you protect your balance sheet against those risks. Nevertheless, we see that in Belgium, very few companies do have a cyber insurance policy at present. Now, this is not abnormal, and when we look at other new insurance policies over the years, we see that it mostly takes about 10 years for a new insurance policy to really become a standard insurance product. We've seen that with cover for business interruption after fire insurance. We've seen that with the directors and officers, which also came from the US. We've seen it in the food business with the recall and contamination policies, and probably the same thing will happen with cyber insurance. There's maybe one important difference. That's the pace, the speed of which cyber risks evolve. And we hope that companies will not wait too long to buy insurance, and that they certainly will not wait until they will be kicked in the face. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gerrit. Thank you. And last but not least, our last panelist from Unisys will give his view. Left, right, forward.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Being the last, hopefully not the least, is a challenge anyway. Unisys is a global systems integrator. We are working in 80 countries doing security, among other things. So when the title of this workshop was proposed to me, I jumped on it because readiness of organizations and businesses is what we face every day, and this is what our work is based on. So I hope I can give you some insight about what readiness is. Globally, this is a heat map of what cybersecurity readiness is interpreted around the world as of the 14th of December 2014, so 1.5 months ago. You can see there is much red there. There is green, intense green in North America. There are patchy green patterns in Europe, across Europe. Brazil is standing out, Australia is standing out, Russia is pale green, so something is going on there, but you see red everywhere else, okay? So this means that you have a very complex and composite situations around the world, whereby readiness is understood at different different corners of the world in different ways. And this has to be taken into account because one thing that you have to consider nowadays is that global supply chains are in fact global. Okay? So a bank like BNP Paribas, Fortis, whatever, is working out of Brussels, does work around the world. And anything that happens in Singapore or in Argentina might affect the business of the bank. So, one thing that you have to consider is that there is no border, there is no boundary any longer. So that heat map will affect your business, your organization, wherever you are. Okay. If we take a focused look onto Europe, you will see that there are some orange, amber areas there. Portugal, Switzerland, Belgium, Ireland. These are the areas with the least level of readiness, according to this research. Now, some of you might feel offended by this, but I didn't do it, honestly. I just found it on the net. But this is, if you could read it, it's a detailed, numerical metrics that provide that sort of ranking. On a global basis, on the left, you see that the US is standing out, 0.8241 out of, 1. Being a normalized ranking, this gives you a sort of peer-to-peer comparison of all, the actors, which are the countries, observed. US number 1, Canada number 2, Australia number 3. This is not by chance. US has invested heavily after 9/11, and there's been a drive, that we have observed over the past 10 years. Europe, you've heard from the previous panel, is a sort of lagging behind, observing, discussing a lot, talking a lot. And I think that if I may say something, the European Commission has been doing a very good work in providing a framework, but in a way, member states have been very slow in adopting that framework and implementing the measures. That is the result, on a global scale. Germany is the first member of the European Union in the list. The first European countries is Norway, at number 4, but it's not part of the European Union, unfortunately. Germany is number 5, and then you have the UK. Again, at number 5, same level, basically. And then all other countries are a bit behind. On a European level, that is the ranking on the right. If you're interested, I can send you these slides, or you can find a report. As UTI, is the source, and ABI Research, a New York analyst. But let me draw your attention on some of the consolidated facts here, IT decision makers being interviewed by another research done by BT, and this is also 2014, September, October 2014, so it's very recent, focusing on businesses. So this is not public, public sector organizations. They say and they claim only 30% of business leaders, that is the board, CEOs, the board, the board members, globally see cybersecurity as an absolute priority. This is the snapshot taken from the industry, all industries. This is cross industries. This is several thousands of IT decision makers, CIOs, CISOs, CXOs, whatever, interviewed. Okay, so from their point of view, this is the average value. But you see Europe is down to 20%, while the Americas, which is basically North America plus Brazil here, okay, 44%. So it's more than double. And Asia-Pac, Australian being the driver, is 28%. So, I think we should look into ourselves here in Europe, and we should consider how behind we are in the curve. Okay, and we should try to consider what we need to do to expedite and accelerate a bit the process. Okay, as you can see, this number, global average of 30% goes up to 52% in Brazil. It would be interesting to understand why. There was no explanation on the report that I could find. And it's only 41%, to contrary to what we have said before, about the readiness of the country. Here, only 41% of the business leaders at board level understand the value of cybersecurity, and drops down to 19% in Germany, and listen, 17% in the UK. Other European countries are not faring better, believe me. And another question, do you think the board of your company underestimates the importance of cybersecurity? 60%, actually 58% said no. They do not understand. They do underestimate. So this is critical. Okay, 58% of decision makers think that the board does not understand the value of cybersecurity. They underestimate the risk. 74% in the US, which is, again, an interesting number, because that gives the sort of difference between operational managers and those who sit at the top. Okay, and 66% of businesses are, however, able, among those who are interested, of course, to measure the return on investment, which I found a bit bizarre, personally, because calculating the return on investment on an investment in security has always been hazardous and very, very difficult. And this is always one of the major hurdles we have found when we are presenting solutions to our clients in the cybersecurity space. Now, if you look at the present and the future, this is the list basically on the left. You can't read it, but I tell you that the two major source of risk seen for the present and the future are non-malicious insider threat. That is, risk of fraud, errors, misbehavior, basically, from internal resources, and hacktivism, that is some external, of course, source and external actors, and malicious insider threat, that is fraud. Now, I can tell you that we see a trend now, especially in financial institutions, and we are working a lot in providing, for instance, biometrically enabled logical access control solutions to the financial sector so that they can crack down on fraud. We see that growing very quickly here in Europe, with all the difficulties given the legislation, the privacy constraints, etc. But we see that coming because this is what they fear, and we see this happening today. On the right side, the question is, in an ideal world, what would you do to protect your organization? 75% say easily, we'll redo the whole damn thing. We'll redo our infrastructure, which again is easily said, but is not easily done. And the amount of investment, the thinking behind that, is not very clear. One of the problems, and I'm going to close in 2 minutes, but let me draw your attention on 2 elements. Number one, the old traditional perimeter security posture is obsolete. Firewalls, antivirus, these are fine, you know, but these are a little thing. 80% of the investment still goes there, but they account only for about 30% of the defense. Now, the perimeter, what is the perimeter of an organization that is global, that is using hybrid clouds architectures, that has disruptive technologies like mobility embedded in the in the business processes, that has bring your own devices and programs going on, and that has to interact with a ecosystem, let me put that way, a very wide, vast ecosystems of business partners, whether they are clients, whether they are suppliers, cooperators in the business processes, co-manufacturers, for instance, or whatsoever. The business models are so complex that you cannot speak any longer of one perimeter. You have to consider a logical perimeter, which is around the assets. So how do you defend an asset which is basically sunk in an ecosystem of communication, relationships, exchanges? It's a totally different paradigm. And this is not to be there for an easy solution, okay? Technology shifts, the architectures, clouds, computing, mobility, collaborative, social media-driven models, data that are structured and destructured. Okay, it was easy in the past. You had a database, you protect the database, and well, off you are. Here, you have the structured data. You have documents, you have PDFs, you have video clips, footage. You have all sorts of information that comes together in a very complex way, I should say, and basically a shift in the security paradigm towards what we call the zero trust security model. That is, do not take for granted that you are protected. In fact, you're not. So, as our colleague from Intel said before, understand what's happening, try to react as fast as possible. If I may chime in what he said before, 45 days, he said it takes to detect a breach. The average out there in the industry is 229 days. So his team, which is skilled, does take 45 days. But the average out there in your organization is 229 days. This is a fact. Okay? Do you feel secure? This is the problem. So, zero trust and adaptive perimeter are the 2 main strategic lines of looking at security going forward. That's, easily said. It's not easily done at all, believe me. It's not easy because it implies a total redesign of the security model. The concept, how IT is seen, not as the source of, driving and the responsible for driving security. Security should be reporting to the CEO, to the board, should be part of a pervasive approach within the organization from a cultural point of view, organizational, educational, investment in change management that talks security to the employees of an organization. Well, I don't see much of that going on. As long as the board will struggle to understand and appreciate and assess the impact and the value of security, well, this will be the situation. Hackers, well, long live the hackers, because they will, enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, are there any questions to these panelists? I don't know if there is a mic in the room. Yes, okay. Please state also your name and organization or sector.
Hello. Yep, my name is Vincent Defresne and I'm from the company Enviso. I had a question actually for Mr. Mertz from the cyber insurance. We know that if our house is equipped, or at least I hope so, if it's equipped with a good alarm system that is approved by the insurance company, we may get a discount on our premium. I was wondering if the same mechanism was being thought of in your case for cybersecurity insurance, where when a company would have certain controls in place, you might consider giving them a premium that would be less high? And in that case, what are you considering in terms of controls? Because I guess that's an interesting question. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. At present, there is not such a requirement. In fact, the requirements of the insurance companies that provide cyber insurance at present are very low. And there is a questionnaire to fulfill. In most cases, there's not even an audit done. So at this time, requirements are very low. Of course, when time will pass, insurers will have to pay more and more losses, and they will get more severe. That's logic. And then, of course, they will start implementing minimum quality standards. But at present, I cannot tell you which standard that will be in the future.
Good. Other reaction from the panel on this cyber insurance topic? Maurice, is that an element in the weaponry against cyber threats?
I definitely think that it is to a certain degree. I think the way that I've seen the business transforming, when the business has taken the position that I'm securing business assets, like or technology assets, then insurance, replacing the loss is very, the loss of that asset, whether in availability or the data that it held, was kind of a definable element. But when you look at the loss of business reputation or other types of maybe non-physical or exactly definable cost elements, I don't know how insurance replaces that risk. Right?
It's very hard.
Actually, Gerrit, I have a question for you as well. Yes. When you were talking about this so eloquently, how does your organization itself, is it insured itself, and how is that happening?
Yes, we are maybe first of all to explain that we are an insurance broker, and so we are not an insurance company. But we do have insurance for quite a long time. But that insurance came from a property history, which means that we were in the past. What were you protecting? You were protecting the hardware, if it would get fire or water damage or whatever. So it came from that history. And those insurance companies started little by little also to give you cover for the real virtual risk, the cyber risks. But especially for our company, of course, we have so many vital data that are about, for example, when it's about health insurance, that are so critical that it was very hard for us to find an insurance company that wanted to cover our liability. So our own financial damage, that was no problem, but the liability part, we had to look for that very hard. But finally, we managed, of course, but it was hard. So I think for financial institutions in general, finding a good cyber insurance is not always easy, especially not for the liability part, because it's very hard for insurance companies to calculate, to analyze how far this liability will go. What will happen with those data if they're hacked? It will liability in the US or liability in Europe is a completely other story. So it's quite hard to calculate that for them.
Okay. Wim, I heard Maurice saying that we should be enabling the business. Also, you mentioned that we should enable the business and allow people having access to technology like social media. Question to you from a banking perspective. I remember the days where in certain banks they even superglued the USB ports in order to not use them at all. How is that situation now? Do you, for example, enable cloud computing in your organization?
We are taking, as many of our peers in the industry, tentative steps to allow this, or to at least explore in some areas of the business and some processes where this can be done. I don't think we fully understand it yet, but the purpose of taking these tentative steps is to develop that understanding. So yes, with regards to the ancient, or rather the traditional security practice of trying to disable as much as possible the the ability of a user to do his work. I think that the security practice in general has evolved a lot in that domain. I think that any organization recognizes the need that the way that people work needs to evolve with the times. So if digital working is a matter of reality, then as an organization you adapt. What the bank does in that domain is it puts in place then the security infrastructure, let's say, to minimize the risks. And at the other end, it requires end users to have a degree of awareness, to be an active actor in the reassurance, or rather in the assurance that you want to have end to end.
Okay, thank you. Other questions in the room? Yes, there are two in the middle.
Hello, Peter Admers, banking sector. I have a question about the insurance. As said by Mr. Tavano, we're already running behind in Europe with respect to cybersecurity, the tackling of cybersecurity. Will an insurance not even larger the gap between the bad guys and the good guys? Because now it's an easy way out for business, just to say, okay, we take insurance and all our problems are solved. We're not going to invest in implementing controls and so on.
I really don't think so. I think every company knows that a good risk management policy starts in preventing risks and controlling risks. And an insurance is only a last resort, and that protects your balance sheets whenever it goes wrong anyway. It was already mentioned before. If your system is hacked and you get bad press for that, the damage for your reputation will be terrible. The relations with your customers will be hit. So I don't think that any company will stop investing in cybersecurity because they have cyber insurance. I think a good risk management means that you do both. You try to have a good cybersecurity policy, but if it goes wrong, and I think nobody here dares to say that it cannot go wrong, even if you have the best security in place, it can still go wrong. In that case, you need your insurance policy. I make the comparison with your fire insurance. It's not because people of companies have fire insurance in place that they do not invest in smoke detectors, in compartmentalization of their buildings. So I think a good risk management means that you have both.
Yep. There was another question there in the middle. Question for all the panelists. What is the best initiative that you have seen or implemented that you would recommend to the audience in terms of cyber readiness? Maybe Roberto? Start with you.
We have seen a few, in fact. We operate as a systems integrator, so we do build the solutions, but we do also provide managed security services. So we see the two worlds. It's interesting how some organizations are taking now a full risk mitigation approach. Therefore, cybersecurity is part of a wider program, as said before. And by that way, insurance comes in the picture as a way to mitigate the risk once everything else has been played out, and ruled out. So we see some of these, how can I say, articulated approaches out there. The more interesting is that they come from the top. Mm-hmm. So once they come from the top, they're really pervasive. They really cover the whole enterprise, and you see cross-fertilization, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of compliance. All organizations within all the functions within the organization move together, and they take it seriously, and they take it to the next level. When it's just an IT-driven solution, well, it's in a way either doomed to fail or be very limited and does not have the impact they should have.
Okay. Gerrit, what have you seen as best initiative to, and don't mention cyber insurance, mention something else?
Well, especially for cyber insurance, in one of the last cyber insurance policies we saw coming on the market, there was included in the insurance policy also a crisis number that the client can call in case of a problem or when he thinks there is a problem. And behind that number, there are two services. The first one is the legal service, which is forgotten in many cases. There is also a legal aspect, how to communicate with the press, how to communicate with your customers. And those legal consultants help our customers to manage that in a good way. The second is, of course, the technical consultants that try to help to mitigate the technical problem. So, but even in insurance, we see that insurance companies try to help the client to mitigate the problem, to make it as small as possible, of course, in their own interest as well, because then they have to pay less as a loss. But the first interest is, of course, a company that has a smaller cyber problem.
Maurice, best initiative you've seen?
Sure. I think it's hard to come down to one, but I want to say two good ones. One is about involving the user. So a corporation had a program called My Security Alerts, and it was an automated process to get security questions in front of the user based from their SOC. So the user would be able to be part of the security decision-making process, whether event was suspicious, whether he did that activity, whether he was in that location, and they use that to, they really involve the user as a sensor and in the decision-making process. And the second one was actually in a financial institution in the Netherlands. I was very, very impressed with the way that this team went about measuring security. So they have a problem with executive awareness. They had a lot of silos, but they wanted to make it a fact that they showed the value and measurability of security in every aspect. So they made that a key initiative for their team.
Okay, Wim, best initiative you've implemented, or?
Yeah, I would also like to express it in criteria more than picking one specific initiative. Abstracting from what Mo said, it's about organizational alignment. So initiatives in your organization that you can take that strengthen that organizational alignment, because ultimately there are typically always pockets of excellence where people know what the urgency of the matter is and how to solve it through controls or through technology, through changes to processes, etc. But in a larger organization, you have to shift the organization to adopt that. And that is the bigger problem very often. Yep. So cybersecurity readiness, doing that effectively, depends on the ability to align the organization. That's one thing. The other thing is about sharing, because for a lot of us, the threshold is high to acquire the skills, to acquire the solutions. So for me, outside my own organization, the best initiative is the one where we share information, where we share or pool resources to make things happen as well.
So you're referring to Fabelfin amongst each other, which is the coordination between all the banks in Belgium?
Among others, indeed. Okay.
Good. Questions? None yet? Okay. I continue. You mentioned about the measurement and the maturity, but are you in support of, or have you seen some kind of dashboard to measure cyber readiness of your organization or of an organization? And then looking beyond the technology and beyond the infrastructure, but also measuring the awareness, the alertness, the internal and the external threats. Have you seen that, Maurice?
I've seen it done in a number of different aspects. I don't think anybody has a holistic picture. Seen organizations who measure exposures quite well, either through consistent collection of vulnerability data and how they mitigate that, up through pen testing and how that is incorporated into that process. I've seen that be quite very valuable and a regular process. I've seen others look at the value of security and trying to say, and this is actually a pet project of myself, is that we measure the value of security a lot of times in cost terms only, and that is absolutely important, but I think there's a lot more value in terms of operational efficiency and improved security capability And we have to come up with some model that looks at the various security controls like prevention, detection, response, anticipation, remediation, and then all the various controls in those building blocks, and figure out how we can help a customer measure their security. How have we given them measurable security capability improvement by aligning to those building blocks? So that's something I'm working on as a part of my team projects.
Yeah. I'm asking the question because, as mentioned by all of you, is that executive support and the top management knowledge about this is important, but they don't have time to read 40 or 100 pages, and they like short messages. So, Wim, is that something that you also exercise, that dashboarding technique?
Yes, but not in today, at least in a way where we can consolidate it in one meaningful, the word meaningful is very important, notion. Across our capabilities, we have the ability to say, with regards to the performance of that capability, we're there. And we use dashboarding techniques, the red, amber, green, where we establish a target and a threshold, and then we measure where we are with regards to that. That is meaningful within the people, or in the people involved in the process or in the capability who manage that and who can communicate about that in their direct periphery. As a communication instrument to senior management, it only goes that far. Because let's face it, across a range of 30 plus capabilities or controls, you lose them somewhere along the way. So for me, how do you roll that up? How do you articulate in a meaningful way your security posture regarding threats is still something that we have to figure out. I've seen examples, but they may work in some organizations, but I haven't seen examples yet where I can say, okay, this would work for us.
Okay. Maybe again a question to all of you on the panel here is you can't do cybersecurity readiness on your own, even though you might be the expert or you might be the best consultant. Who are the people, the functions that you definitely need to be involved in to get a higher success in terms of cyber readiness? Which are the functions in the organization that you would definitely need having buy-in? Of course, aside top management and aside yourself as security expert to have buy-in. Roberto?
Well, I would start with the CEO, of course. The endorsement comes from there, you know. If it comes top down, and if he believes in that, he wants the report up to him, so that everybody is, in a way, feeling that this is important, number one. Number two, you would start with the business operations. I'm not talking about IT still, you see. Business operations have to understand the value of security in terms of risk, assessment of the risk, mitigation of the risk, and ability to cope with that. You know, you will be breached, definitely. What happens next? How do you react? What is next? And then, last but not least, I should say IT that enables the defense posture that you have agreed upon. So technology is, of course, the final enabler, but it's functional to the design and the organizational model that you have decided will apply to your organization, which is a strategic choice. The posture you will have, your organization will have, vis-a-vis the problem of cyber defense, cyber security. And this is the topic. Anything else follows. Okay, you can choose technology A or B or C, whatever.
Gerrit, which functions do you want to be involved with in that cyber insurance story?
It's a good question. When it comes to cyber insurance, we see a phenomena that we call the sleep of the innocent. When we talk about cyber insurance to the CFO, he sometimes has the reaction, that's ICT, I don't understand what you're talking about, go to ICT. When we talk to the CIO, he says, well, I have my security policy in place, but insurance, I don't know what you're talking about. So I think when it comes to cyber insurance, the CEO needs to be involved, and finally he will need to take the decision about the insured capital, how much should be insured, which type of cover needs to be taken. Finally, that will be the decision of the CEO.
Okay. Maurice, functions that are needed to get cybersecurity readiness?
I'll take maybe a slightly different angle to that, and I'll look at it from the vendor perspective into the business. And I noticed today, in years past, and I've only been in this as a vendor for a few years, but we positioned technology to a technology person. And today we have to position the value of technology to enterprise architecture, to the security operations center, to management, as well as to all of the technical people. So we have to ensure that our solutions, whatever we advise or position, exposes or has value to each one of those areas. So I think that represents a cross-section of different business stakeholders that we have to that are looking at security technology as and wanting to know the value to them.
Yep.
So.
Wim?
The short answer is everywhere. Now that may
That's
be
going to take you a long time, right? That's
exactly.
a mission for life then.
Let me get back to this notion of how do you assure end-to-end security in the bank. There's stuff that the bank does, and where IT is typically a supplier for a large part of the solution. And then there's what the end user, be that the employee, the average employee, or a customer, needs to do or needs to be aware of. So if you take these two together, then in a broad sense, you're everywhere, right? If you want to get things moving, then obviously your management lines are the place to try to create awareness. That will be more easy if you pool your efforts with operational risk functions, and especially in an organization like ours with specialist support functions like fraud management, etc.
Yep. I'm surprised none of you mentioned groups like the auditors, external or internal, who can sometimes rattle the cage a little bit harder or softer, or external, experts like pen testers and stuff like. Especially you, Wim, you must know them by heart, all of them by name. How do you see that? Do they play a role, or is that just to really a last resort?
I was waiting for that, actually.
Of course, I have to ask.
They, well, depends a little on the culture of the audit function in the organization. I think in our world, the auditors typically take a third line of defense role, which means that when they pick up on things, implicitly it means that everybody else has missed it, or at least that's implicitly included in the observations. And of course, if you're in the first line, very often that doesn't help you, right? Because it creates an aura of, you guys have missed a few things, or you're not doing your best well enough. So, how to really qualify that? They can surely create momentum, yeah, or they can help create momentum, but it's not always, let's say, a very well-tasting beverage, to put it like that.
Okay, I'm looking at Gerrit now from in cyber insurance. I assume, or I can imagine that you don't sign just anything without having some kind of assurance somewhere by somebody externally or internally saying they have already some stuff. You will not be hit by a huge claim tomorrow. How do you handle that?
Well, as I said, there is a questionnaire to be filled out, and if there are some alarming answers on that questionnaire, there will be an external consultant sent in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Maurice, have you been in touch with those kind of assurance type of people, or?
In my personal experience, I have no experience with auditors, and so I'm happy to say that right now.
This is your first one. Then.
Exactly. But I wanted to take up on a comment that was maybe, or a question that was made before about how insurance might affect the level of readiness, and I think, honestly, I think it may raise the level, because what it forces is a higher minimum standards. And you look at Cyber Essentials and Belgian, the security guide that's come out, from the Belgian government here, and all across. I've seen that across multiple industries as well as governments. That they're raising the bar for what is the foundation, and I think having that bar raised to a higher level for cyber is very important, and allows. I think some of that is partly driven by insurance, as well as the need to manage the risk. So that's my my take on it.
Perfect, and I think that's a very nice ending, because indeed you refer to the guide, which is also available in this conference, the Belgian Cybersecurity Guide, which basically tries to help create readiness. It's developed by a group of people, but what most interesting of this guide is that indeed to bring cyber readiness to a higher level in organizations, it is built and reviewed and made by a board member, a CEO of a startup, but also of a huge company. He's a board member in a huge company. And so in that sense, he filtered out all the difficult words that board members do not understand. And I think that's an added value. So by that sense, I think you're right. Any element helps to bring the level of awareness and readiness higher. I thank you all for your insights, and well, they deserve a round of applause.
Thank you.